What is up, guys? Delboy here. So, Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker has finally been confirmed for the 31st of March. It goes down in Cardiff at the Principality Stadium. So 75,000, 80,000 people will be watching in the stadium. So that's a good look. I'm glad this fight has finally been made. I think it's a solid heavyweight fight between two unbeaten champions. And stylistically, I think it should go down quite well. First things first, I want to give credit to Joseph Parker. He is fighting on the road now in the UK for the second time in a row. He defended his WBO heavyweight title against his mandatory challenger, Hughie Fury, in Hughie Fury's backyard in Manchester. So he defended his belt away from home. And now he's going into a big unification away from home. Obviously, Joshua is not from Cardiff, but let's be honest, anywhere in the UK, wherever he fights, is going to be like his hometown. So Parker goes into this fight in the lion's den, so to speak. So Joseph Parker deserves a lot of credit for that. And it's something I like to see from fighters. I like to see guys go to different countries, fight in your opponent's backyard. I'm not saying do it every fight, but just do it once in a while. It's a good look to me. That's why I'm really behind Alexander Usyk. It's one of the reasons, because this guy has shown that he doesn't care where the fight is. He just wants those titles. He wants the best names, and he'll go anywhere to get those fights. That's what I want to see. So credit to Joseph Parker, defending against Hughie Fury in Fury's backyard, and then following up with a unification fight in Joshua's backyard. Great look to me. So credit to Joseph Parker. The fight itself should gel quite well. Neither one of these guys is a defensive genius. You know, both guys are there to be hit, and we've seen both guys get hit. We saw Dillian Whyte have some success against Anthony Joshua, catching him with that big left hook and hurting him. We saw Vladimir have a lot of success against Anthony Joshua. He dropped him hard with that right hand, and he landed numerous right hands in that fight, and jabs as well. And vice versa, Joseph Parker. Carlos Takam had a hell of a lot of success against Joseph Parker. He was landing a lot of shots. Ruiz's jab was landing a lot on Parker. You know, Ruiz's counterpunching at times was giving Parker trouble. You know, both of these guys can be hit. These guys don't move their heads. They're very upright. They are relatively slow on their feet, especially Joshua. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this fight sort of turn out to be a bit of a slugfest, actually. And that'll be interesting, because I've been sort of looking at the build-up, and one thing's interested me, and that is the confidence of Joseph Parker. He's saying that he's going to shatter Anthony Joshua's glass chin. He's going to make him gas out. He's going to bash Joshua up, whatever. He's saying Joshua's overrated. All that is fine. I disagree with the chin comment, but he sees something here, and he's really letting the world know. Joseph Parker's not a talker. He's not a guy who trash talks opponents. He's not really a guy who says what he's going to do. He's just a guy who shows up and fights, basically. But for whatever reason, he sees something in this Joshua fight, and in response, Joshua hasn't really responded too well to that. He's saying that he's not going to shake Parker's hand after the fight, and all that sort of nonsense. So, listen, we've seen Joshua lose his cool once before against Dillian Whyte. He lost his cool in that fight, and it showed. If Joseph Parker can slowly worm his way under Anthony Joshua's skin, that could be interesting, because let's say he does that, he gets under Joshua's skin in the build-up, they get in the ring, and it starts out at a high tempo. Both guys are landing shots, and immediately it's looking like it's going to go down the slugfest route. At that point, Joshua's ego is going to kick in. He's gonna remember what has been said in the build-up, and he's gonna let emotions get the better of him. You know, and that will be interesting, because we saw with Dillian Whyte where Dillian was trash talking a lot in the build-up. He was saying Joshua was a fake, he was a phony, he was a fraud, and that sort of talk really got under AJ's skin. And Parker can sort of look at that Dillian Whyte build-up and build on that, because Joshua is a guy Joshua's personality is interesting because this guy clearly has a massive ego. He's got a huge ego. And when Parker's in the build up to this fight, when he's saying that Joshua's a hype job and he's got a glass chin and he's got no stamina, when he says things like that, that's going to get under his bonnet. And although I've praised Joshua's mentality, that could be one of his crutch points. You know, just his ego, because look at the Klitschko build-up. In the build-up, both guys were very respectful of each other. Neither guy was trash-talking, but both guys were confident. It was very nice. It was very... It was very PC, put it that way. And neither guy really got their ego sort of fired up in the build-up. And in the actual fight, when there was a crisis, Joshua, I felt, dealt with it quite well. He took a lot of big shots, he got dropped hard, and he dealt with it well. Now, let's switch the scenarios. Let's say that wasn't Vladimir Klitschko. Let's say that is Deontay Wilder, who has been trash-talking Joshua the whole way through the build-up, who's been questioning Joshua's courage, his chin, his stamina, all of that. Let's say that is Wilder, who had AJ in that exact same scenario. Do you think Joshua would have fought with that same sort of calmness and know how to get through a crisis? I'm not so sure. I think his emotions would have got the better of him and his ego would have got the better of him. But the difference was, in the Klitschko build-up, Vladimir never really stoked that ego. He never really fired Joshua up in the build-up. And that could be a silly theory, but it's just it's an interesting point, because the only grudge match Joshua has had against Dillian Whyte, he fought very reckless at times, you know, and he made that fight much harder than it should have been. Like I said, Dillian Whyte he's a tough man, and he'll give it a go, he'll come to fight, but at best, I think he's like a fringe level fighter at world level. He's fringe level. He's like a European level fighter, domestic level fighter, and he gave Joshua a lot of trouble. You know, if Joshua fought that with a calm head, he wouldn't have had that much trouble with Dillian Whyte, as far as I'm concerned, but he didn't. So, Joseph Parker's trash talk has got a reaction from Anthony Joshua, and that is interesting to me. It'll be interesting to see how that sort of pans out over the build-up. Joseph Parker, to me, needs to keep on pressing that button. Keep on taking subtle little digs. Just keep on chipping away and make Joshua, try to make Joshua lose focus and lose composure in the ring. That could be an interesting avenue for Joseph Parker to go down. Another interesting point I want to go down is the whole theory that Joseph Parker has this iron jaw. Now, I'm not saying that's not true. Not at all. But the reality is, that's not been proven. Hughie Fury can't punch. He can't punch his way out of a wet paper bag. Andy Ruiz, yeah, he can hit, but at what level? This was a guy who couldn't knock out Zambano Love. You know, we've got to be real here. So, and Carlos Takam. Carlos Takam's a strong guy. His power is respectable. But again, Carlos Takam's not like a one-punch knockout artist. He's just a guy with good stamina, a really good chin, and with okay power. You know, he's not a big power puncher. So, people are saying Parker's got this iron jaw. He's never fought a real puncher in the pros. Well, he's never fought an elite puncher, put it that way. And yeah, his team say he's never been dropped in sparring, but listen, I've not watched every single one of Joseph Parker's sparring sessions, so I'm not going to believe that is true. You know, I'm not going to, for his team are going to say that. So the whole theory that Joseph Parker has an iron jaw, to me, is completely unproven. Again, I'm not saying it's not even true, but listen, we can't bank on that. We can't be sort of relying on that when we sort of talk about this fight. And if Joseph Parker goes into this fight believing in his jaw that much, then that could be bad for him. He can't go into this fight with a mindset of whatever Joshua throws can't hurt me. Because, yeah, some people have questioned Anthony Joshua's power, and they say it's a bit overrated, and that could be true. In fact, that probably is true, but Joshua can still crack. You don't want to be reckless, you don't want to stand in front of him. If he lands too many shots on you, the fight's going to get stopped. You know, the fight is going to get stopped, that's the reality. And Joseph Parker can't go into this fight with delusions of grandeur and act like he's Oliver McCall in terms of chin. He can't do that. He just can't. He needs to... What Joseph Parker needs to do, and it's really, really simple. A lot of people like to overcomplicate boxing, but what Parker needs to do when he's standing in front of AJ, just keep a high guard. It's not hard. Parker's not a guy who's going to slip and slide shots. He's not a guy who's going to bend at the waist. Just keep a high guard and try to be somewhat responsible. Also, from a high guard, if you've boxed before, especially if you've got reasonably quick hands, when you're using a high guard, when you jab from it, sometimes that jab is very hard to read. It's very hard to see coming. So if Parker can do that, use a high guard and then sort of jab off it, that could be interesting because Joseph Parker does have quick hands, especially in his come-up fights. His hand speed was really impressive, but he has put on a bit of weight recently, and his hand's not quite as quick. But on the come-up, Joseph Parker's hand speed was one of his big selling points. And I would like to see him try to utilise that. Use that high guard and jab behind it and then sort of build off that. Obviously, there's going to be times when Parker needs to trade with AJ. That's going to have to happen, and he's going to have that iron jaw, because if he doesn't, regardless of what you think of AJ's power, he is going to get hurt. So I would like to see Parker use that high guard, use that jab off it, and look for the openings. Don't try to force it too much. Don't go into warrior mode straight away. And like I said, there's going to be times when you have to do that, but try to minimise the punishment you take. Don't take too much too early. Drag it out. Try to take this fight in the second half. That's what I feel Parker should do. As for Anthony Joshua, overall I do think Joshua is a better fighter. I think Joshua, firstly, he is obviously the bigger man, and I do think he is still the bigger puncher. I did question Joshua's punch power in terms of it maybe being a little bit overrated, but to me he still hits harder than Joseph Parker. And one thing, to me, I like Joshua's punch repertoire. He can throw pretty much every shot in the book. He's got a good 1-2 when he uses it. He's got a nice uppercut on the inside. He's got some nice little subtle body shots on the inside. Joshua's punch repertoire is pretty decent. He doesn't really hook too much, but most of his shots are well delivered. And I mentioned about Joshua's shots on the inside, and Joshua to me does get overrated in a lot of senses. But one area Joshua doesn't really get credit for is his ability on the inside. I'm not saying Joshua is a master fighter on the inside. I'm not saying that at all. But Joshua can throw shots on the inside. He can create space for himself to land that uppercut through the middle. He does land some body shots when he's up close. He is good in the clinch. He's strong. Joshua on the inside is actually a tad underrated as far as I'm concerned. Against Klitschko, he didn't really let the clinch get the better of him. In fact, he was actually initiating clinches in that fight, and the uppercut on the inside was working. He was landing some nice body shots. His inside game isn't bad, and that's one area of Joshua's game that he doesn't really get credit for. And to me, Joseph Parker's inside game is non-existent. So when it's up close, Joshua is going to get the better of it. As far as I'm concerned, he's going to get the better of it. He can shorten his shots. I've not seen Parker do that too much. And that's an area where, when it is close, Joshua needs to take advantage of it. He needs to land some nice little body shots, slow Parker down, because ultimately people are questioning Joshua's gas tank. So you need to take something out of him, just in case it does go long. So I feel Joshua, overall, he's got a better punch repertoire. He's a better inside fighter. And offensively, I just think he's better. I think he puts his shots together better. He's just a better offensive fighter than Joseph Parker. I actually also think Joshua has better timing than Joseph Parker as well. I really do. I think he does have a better understanding of distance control and, sort of setting up his right hand. I think he is more of an educated fighter than Joseph Parker. So overall, I do think Joshua's a better fighter, but I feel that Parker can give him a real test if he comes in there in good shape and with the right game plan. Interestingly, from what I hear from both camps, both guys are gonna shed some weight. That's a good bit of news because, like I said, I felt Parker looked pretty sluggish in his last few fights, and Joshua looked really sluggish against Carlos Takam. Against Takam, Joshua was the heaviest he's ever been. So to hear both guys are going to lose a bit of weight, I think that's a good thing. You know, both guys need to be a little bit quicker, as far as I'm concerned. Joshua needs to be around the weight he was when he fought Dominic Breazeale and Charles Martin. That's to me, that is Joshua's ideal fighting weight, because I've seen a few people say this, but if you go back and watch Joshua's early fights and then watch the Takam fight and the Klitschko fight, the speed difference is real. It is real, and I know Klitschko and Takam are better fighters than the guys he was originally fighting, but to me the speed difference is still obvious. Joshua, from the start, was a hell of a lot more quicker. And you can clearly tell that the muscle that he's sort of put on has impacted his speed. You can clearly tell that. And Joseph Parker's similar. Look at Parker's fights. And then look at the Kajanu fight. Look at the Ruiz fight. Look at the Huey Fury fight. You know, he looked pretty pondersome in some of those fights. And in his early fights, he was looking really razor sharp and really quick. So yeah, I think losing a bit of weight will serve both guys well, actually. So I'm glad to hear that. Looking forward to this fight. I think Joshua is the rightful favourite. But, I mean, I've seen Joseph Parker at 9-1. To me, that's a little bit disrespectful. I don't think it will be out of the realms of possibility for Parker to pull this off. But I think Joshua still is the rightful favourite. I will make a proper prediction video nearer the time. This is just a video to tell you guys that the fight is on, and just my initial thoughts on this fight. What do you guys think? Peace.